My name is Elena Matthews, 67 years old, and I've learned that sometimes the people we love most can hurt us deepest. When my only daughter Jessica pretended not to know me at her lavish wedding, calling me staff, while her new in-laws mocked my modest dress, I felt invisible. But what happened after I took that microphone changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone in that decorated ballroom. Before I share what unfolded that day, let me know where you're watching from. Drop a like if family drama stories resonate with you. Life has a funny way of teaching you lessons when you least expect them. I spent most of my life as a dedicated school teacher in a small town outside Boston. When my husband Michael passed away suddenly from a heart attack 15 years ago, I became both mother and father to our daughter Jessica, who was just entering her teenage years. Those early days after Michael's death were a blur of grief, confusion, and determination to keep our little family afloat. Jessica was always a bright, beautiful child, with her father's smile and my stubbornness. I treasure memories of our weekend baking sessions, flour dusting her little nose as she insisted on mixing everything herself. We would sit on our porch swing, reading books together until sunset, her small head nestled against my shoulder. Even when money was tight, we found ways to create joy through simple pleasures. For her 10th birthday, I surprised her with a backyard carnival, enlisting neighbors to run homemade game booths. The look of wonder on her face was worth every minute of preparation. After Michael died, I took on additional tutoring jobs in the evenings and weekends to supplement my teacher's salary. Jessica never complained when I missed her soccer games because I was helping another student prepare for college entrance exams. She seemed to understand we were a team working toward her future. Despite our modest means, I was determined to give Jessica every opportunity. I budgeted carefully to afford her piano lessons with Mrs. Abernathy, the retired concert pianist who lived down the street. When Jessica showed academic promise, I somehow found a way to enroll her in Westfield Academy, a private school known for sending graduates to prestigious universities. This meant selling my grandmother's antique china and taking on a summer job at the local library, but watching Jessica thrive made every sacrifice worthwhile. By pinching pennies and investing Michael's small life insurance policy wisely, I managed to build a college fund for Jessica. I still remember her jumping up and down in our living room when the acceptance letter from Brentwood University arrived. It was one of our last purely joyful moments together before things began to change. During her freshman year at Brentwood, Jessica started making friends from wealthy families. Her roommate Madison came from a long line of successful attorneys and invited Jessica to spend holidays at their vacation home in Aspen. Jessica returned from these trips with subtle changes in her speech patterns, dressing style, and expectations. She began using phrases like summer as a verb and commenting that our house was charmingly rustic rather than simply calling it home. By junior year, Jessica had completely transformed. Her natural brown hair was now professionally highlighted blonde, and she spoke with a slight affect that hadn't existed before. When I visited campus, she seemed uncomfortable introducing me to her friends, quickly moving me along if we encountered anyone she knew. I noticed she never corrected people who assumed she came from money. It was during senior year that Jessica met William Harrington III, son of banking executive William Harrington Jr. and social heiress Catherine Winthrop Harrington. William was handsome, well-mannered, and born into a level of privilege Jessica had only recently encountered. She was completely enamored with him and his world. The first time Jessica brought William home for a weekend, I spent days preparing. I painted the guest room, bought new towels, and planned elaborate meals that stretched my cooking abilities. William was polite but detached, examining our home with the air of an anthropologist, studying an unfamiliar culture. When I served dinner on my best dishes, Jessica jumped in to explain they were vintage before I could mention they were simply old and well-loved. After William left, Jessica gave me a list of suggestions. Perhaps I could update my hairstyle from the simple bob I'd worn for 20 years. My habit of saying pleased to meet you instead of pleased to make your acquaintance marked me as unsophisticated. The floral couch that had witnessed countless movie nights and heart-to-heart talks was suburban and should be replaced. Each comment stung, but I told myself she was just nervous about fitting into William's world. When William proposed at his graduation dinner with a diamond ring bigger than anything I had ever seen, Jessica called me in tears of happiness. I was genuinely happy for her while privately worried about the growing distance between us. That night I looked at old photo albums until sunrise, wondering when my down-to-earth daughter had become someone who now corrected my grammar and winced at my sensible shoes. William's parents, the Harringtons, requested a meeting at their country club before wedding planning began in earnest. Jessica coached me extensively beforehand, warning me about everything from which fork to use to avoiding topics like teacher unions and my volunteer work at the community center. When Catherine Harrington greeted me with air kisses and called me Alice instead of Elena Jessica, didn't correct her. William's father barely acknowledged me beyond a cursory handshake before returning to his phone calls. Throughout lunch, the Harringtons discussed the wedding as if I wasn't present, referring to Jessica as if she had emerged fully formed into their social circle without a past. When I mentioned the small savings I had set aside to contribute to the wedding, Catherine laughed lightly and said, "That's sweet, but this will be a proper Harrington event. We've already spoken with our wedding planner about venues in Newport." Jessica squeezed my hand under the table, but her eyes pleaded with me not to speak up. I swallowed my pride with my overpriced salad and reminded myself this was about her happiness, not my feelings. As wedding planning progressed, Jessica involved me less and less. She claimed it was to spare me stress, but I would discover decisions had been made without my input or even knowledge. When I asked about the bridal shower Jessica mentioned, it had already happened, claiming the invitation must have been lost in the mail. Later, I saw photos on social media of Jessica surrounded by elegantly dressed women in what appeared to be a ballroom opening gift after gift. Each exclusion hurt, but I rationalized it away. Jessica was busy. The Harringtons had their way of doing things. I was being oversensitive. But in quiet moments, I wondered if my daughter was ashamed of me. Still, I told myself that once the wedding excitement passed, we would find our way back to the close relationship we once had. 3 months before the wedding, elegant cream envelopes began arriving in my friends' mailboxes. Eleanor, my closest friend since our college days, called to ask about the beautiful invitation she had received, embossed with gold lettering and tied with silk ribbon. I assured her mine must be coming soon, though a knot formed in my stomach. 2 weeks later, after everyone I knew had received their invitations, a plain white envelope arrived with a simple printed card inside. It looked nothing like the invitations others had described. When I called Jessica, she sounded flustered, explaining there had been a mix-up with the printer and they had to rush a second batch. Something about her tone didn't ring true, but I pushed the thought aside. As I studied the seating chart Jessica reluctantly shared, I noticed my name at table 27 in the far corner of the reception hall. When I asked about it, Jessica hesitated before explaining that the head table was only for the wedding party and the tables near it were for the Harringtons' important business associates and friends. I would be seated with distant cousins and family friends, whom nobody would mind tucking away in the back. The implications were clear. I was an embarrassment to be minimized. Despite this revelation, I was determined to support my daughter on her big day. I withdrew $2,000 from my carefully managed retirement fund to purchase a new dress for the occasion. The navy blue designer outfit cost more than 3 months of my grocery budget, but I hoped it would help me blend in with the wealthy crowd and make Jessica proud. Eleanor accompanied me on the shopping trip, her practical nature both a comfort and an irritation as I tried on outfit after outfit. "You sure you want to spend all this money just to please people who clearly don't appreciate you?" she asked, as I examined my reflection in a dressing room mirror. "It's not about them," I insisted. "It's about Jessica. I don't want to embarrass her." Eleanor's expression softened. "Elena, nothing you could wear would embarrass a daughter who truly values you." I purchased the dress anyway, along with matching shoes that pinched my toes and a small clutch purse that barely held my reading glasses. I also scheduled an appointment at an upscale salon for hairstyling on the wedding day, another expense I could ill afford, but deemed necessary. The week before the wedding, Jessica called with what she termed a few helpful suggestions. She spoke quickly, as if running through a checklist. I should not mention her childhood or any financial struggles we had faced. If asked about my career, I should emphasize my position as department chair rather than just teacher. I should avoid topics like politics, religion, or anything controversial. The list went on each item, another small cut to my heart. "And Mom," she added before hanging up, "please don't try to make conversation with William's grandmother. She's very particular about who she speaks with." I hung up feeling like an actor preparing for a role rather than a mother attending her only daughter's wedding. That night I practiced introducing myself in the mirror, trying to sound more sophisticated than the small-town teacher I had always been proud to be. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect weather and a stomach full of butterflies. I woke at dawn too nervous to sleep. As my coffee brewed, I found myself looking through old photo albums again. There was Jessica on her first day of kindergarten, gap-toothed and beaming in the yellow dress she insisted on wearing. Jessica, at 12, proudly displaying the science fair medal she had won. Jessica, at her high school graduation, arms thrown around my neck in unrestrained joy. Where had that girl gone? When had my daughter started seeing me as an obstacle to her social climbing rather than the mother who had devoted her life to her happiness? Eleanor arrived to drive me to my hair appointment, finding me teary-eyed over the photos. "It's not too late to develop a convenient flu," she suggested, only half joking. I shook my head firmly. No matter what, I'm her mother. I'll be there. At the salon, I felt out of place among younger women with designer handbags and casual references to their summer homes. The stylist seemed unimpressed with my thin hair and suggested extensions, which I politely declined. The resulting updo was more severe than I had hoped, but the stylist assured me it was very now and appropriate for a society wedding. Back home, I carefully applied makeup, following a tutorial I had watched repeatedly in preparation. The face looking back at me seemed foreign, somehow older and uncertain, despite the concealer and blush. I slipped into the new dress, fixed a pearl necklace Michael had given me around my neck, and took a deep breath. "You are Elena Matthews," I told my reflection. "You raised a daughter by yourself, put her through college, and built a career helping hundreds of children learn and grow. You belong anywhere your daughter is getting married." But even as I spoke the words, I wasn't sure I believed them anymore. Eleanor insisted on driving me to the venue, an exclusive country club in the wealthiest part of Boston. As we approached through manicured grounds, I gasped at the transformation. White roses and orchids cascaded from every surface. Crystal chandeliers had been hung from trees along the pathway. A string quartet played softly as guests in formal attire made their way inside. The valet looked dubiously at Eleanor's practical sedan among the luxury vehicles, but took the keys with professional courtesy. Eleanor squeezed my hand before leaving to find her own seat, promising to check on me during the reception. As I approached the grand entrance, my confidence faltered at the sight of the security checkpoint where guests were being checked against a list. The guard in a tailored suit looked at me skeptically when I gave my name. "I don't see an Elena Matthews on the family list," he said, scanning his tablet. "Are you with the bride or groom's side?" "The bride," I said, my voice suddenly small. "I'm Jessica's mother." He frowned, clearly not believing me. There must be some mistake. Let me check again. As he consulted with another staff member, I spotted Jessica across the lobby, resplendent in her wedding gown, surrounded by bridesmaids in pale pink. Our eyes met briefly before she quickly looked away, whispering something to the wedding planner beside her. The wedding planner, a sharp-featured woman with an earpiece, approached me with a tight smile. "There seems to be some confusion," she said briskly. "The family entrance is reserved for immediate family. The general guest entrance is around the east side of the building." "But I am immediate family," I protested. "I'm the mother of the bride." The planner's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. If you'll just follow me this way." She led me not to the lobby where other family members were gathering, but to a service corridor normally used by catering staff. My confusion must have shown on my face, because she added, "This will get you to your seat more efficiently. The ceremony is about to begin." As we walked through the back hallways past bustling kitchen staff and storage areas, the reality of my situation began to sink in. My own daughter had deliberately arranged for me to be treated as if I wasn't family at all. The service corridor opened onto the edge of the ceremony space, where hundreds of white chairs were arranged in perfect rows facing an elaborate floral arch. Most seats were already filled with guests in designer clothes and expensive jewelry. As I hesitated, uncertain where to go, Jessica appeared at my elbow, her expression tense beneath her professional makeup. "Mom, what are you doing coming in this way?" she hissed, glancing around to see who might be watching. "The wedding planner brought me this way," I explained, confused. "They wouldn't let me in the main entrance." Jessica sighed with obvious frustration. A well-dressed couple nearby looked in our direction with curiosity, and Jessica's demeanor instantly changed. "Oh, this is one of the caterers," she said to them with a light laugh. "She's just delivered something for the reception." The couple nodded and turned away, but I stood frozen in disbelief. Had my daughter just denied knowing me? Before I could speak, Jessica gripped my arm with surprising strength. "Listen," she whispered urgently. "William's parents have important people here. Business associates, family connections. Please don't make a scene. Just go with it for now, or you can leave if you prefer." "Go with what I asked," my voice barely audible, "pretending I'm not your mother." "Just for today," she pleaded. "I'll explain everything later, I promise. Now, please find your seat in the back before anyone else notices." She hurried away toward the bridal preparation room, leaving me standing alone. Nearby, I noticed William's mother, Catherine, surveying me with cool assessment. She leaned toward a woman in an expensive-looking suit and stage whispered, "Look at that quaint little outfit. Do you think she found it at a discount store?" The women tittered as I pretended not to hear. With burning cheeks, I located table 27 in the farthest corner of the reception area, partially obscured by a large floral arrangement. The table card identified it as Friends of the Bride, though I recognized no one else assigned to sit there. A server approached with champagne, and I gratefully accepted a glass. From my isolated position, I watched as the ceremony began. Jessica looked breathtakingly beautiful walking down the aisle on the arm of William's father. No one seemed to question why the bride's father figure was from the groom's family. No mention was made of me or Michael during the entire ceremony. During the cocktail hour that followed, I tried to mingle but found myself either ignored or met with puzzled looks when I mentioned being Jessica's mother. I overheard snippets of conversation from guests speculating about my absence. "I heard her real mother couldn't make it from Europe," one woman said to her companion. "No, I think she passed away years ago," another replied. "Such a shame." I retreated to my assigned table, fighting back tears and considering whether I should simply leave. What was I doing here if my own daughter was pretending I didn't exist? But something kept me rooted to my seat. Perhaps the fading hope that Jessica would come to her senses, or the stubborn determination not to be driven away from my only child's wedding. When guests began moving to their tables for dinner, I found myself seated with 4 elderly people who appeared to be distant relatives of the Harringtons and a young couple who were colleagues of William. They engaged in conversation among themselves, occasionally giving me polite but confused smiles. No one asked who I was, and I lacked the energy to explain. From my position, I could see Jessica and William at the elevated head table surrounded by their wedding party and the Harringtons. They looked like figures from a magazine, spread beautiful and untouchable. William's father rose to give the first toast, champagne flute held high. When William first told us about Jessica, he began in a booming voice. We were immediately impressed by her grace, intelligence, and poise. It was clear she possessed natural refinement, despite never having proper guidance in her formative years. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd as I sank lower in my chair. The implications were clear. Jessica had overcome her humble beginnings to become worthy of the Harrington name. No one glanced in my direction, as if the mother who had raised her was invisible. As dinner service began, the wedding planner approached my table again, clipboard in hand. "Excuse me," she said, not recognizing me from earlier. "We need some help moving the flower arrangements for the dance floor setup. Could you assist the staff for a moment?" Stunned, I realized she genuinely thought I worked for the catering company. Before I could correct her, one of my table mates looked at me with newfound understanding. "Oh, you're with the event staff. I was wondering why you were sitting here." The humiliation was complete. Rather than create a scene by explaining, I simply stood and followed the planner to the edge of the room, where she handed me off to a catering supervisor who looked confused by my formal attire. "I'm not staff," I said quietly to the supervisor. "I'm actually the mother of the bride." The man's eyes widened with recognition and embarrassment. "I am so sorry, ma'am. There's clearly been a misunderstanding." "It's all right," I assured him, though nothing felt right about this day. It seems to be the theme of the evening. He escorted me back to my table with an apologetic expression, but the damage was done. The other guests now regarded me with uncomfortable glances, unsure what to make of my presence. As the evening progressed, Jessica took the microphone to thank those who had made the day special. She gushed about the Harringtons' voice, breaking with emotion as she said, "You have truly been the parents I never had guiding me and welcoming me into your beautiful family." Each word was a dagger to my heart. I sat perfectly still, my face, a careful mask hiding the devastation beneath. Across the room, William's mother caught my eye and smirked before turning to her socialite friends and making a pointed remark about my sensible shoes. Their laughter carried across the room. Throughout the reception, Jessica maintained her distance, expertly navigating the room to avoid coming near my table. If our eyes happened to meet, she quickly looked away, pretending not to see me. I became invisible, a ghost at my own daughter's wedding. I retreated to the restroom to compose myself, splashing cold water on my face and struggling to understand how we had arrived at this point. As I dried my hands, an elderly woman emerged from one of the stalls, peering at me through thick glasses. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly, "but aren't you Jessica's mother, Elena, isn't it?" The simple recognition nearly broke my composure. "Yes," I managed to say. "I'm Elena." "I'm Margaret Williams' great-aunt," she said, extending a wrinkled hand. "I remember meeting you at the engagement dinner last year. You were telling me about your teaching career." The kindness in her voice brought fresh tears to my eyes. Yes, that was me. Margaret's expression grew troubled. "Why are you sitting all the way in the back? And why did I overhear my nephew introducing someone else as Jessica's mother figure earlier?" I couldn't bring myself to explain the full extent of the situation. "There seems to be some confusion about seating arrangements," I said diplomatically. Margaret shook her head disapprovingly. "In my day, the mother of the bride was honored, not hidden away. Something isn't right here." Her validation of my feelings provided small comfort as we returned to the reception. From across the room, I could see Jessica in animated conversation with a group of guests, laughing and gesturing as she told some story. I moved closer, curious about what had my daughter so engaged, only to freeze when I heard my name. Elena insisted I was destined for greater things than our small-town Jessica was saying, her voice carrying clearly. But she wasn't my real mother, just someone who looked after me. My actual upbringing was handled by my godmother, a wonderful woman with connections to Boston's finest families. The guests nodded appreciatively at this more acceptable origin story, while I stood, rooted to the spot, utterly shattered by the lie. Jessica had not only denied me today, but was actively erasing our entire history together. As I turned to walk away, the best man tapped his glass for attention and began his toast. When William first told me he was dating a girl from a small town, I had my doubts. He announced to general laughter, but Jessica quickly proved she wasn't one of the commoners. She fit right in with our crowd as if she'd been born to it. More laughter followed, with several guests glancing in my direction, connecting the dots about who the commoner in the room might be. I kept my chin up, determined not to show how deeply each casual cruelty cut. When it came time for the cake cutting, I cautiously approached the edge of the gathered crowd, hoping to witness this traditional moment. Jessica spotted me and made a dismissive gesture with her hand, silently indicating I should stay back out of the frame for the professional photographers capturing the moment. Later, as formal family photos were being arranged, I stood nearby, uncertain if I should participate. The photographer looked to Jessica for guidance. "Family only for these shots," she said, without meeting my eyes. "We'll do friend groups after." I was not called for any photos that night. My daughter had officially categorized me as at best a friend and at worst staff. As I watched the Harringtons pose proudly with Jessica between them, I wondered if this was truly what would make her happy long term, or if she would one day regret erasing her past so completely. As the reception entered its fourth hour, the band took a break and guests mingled freely, the open bar having loosened inhibitions and tongues. I remained at my table, contemplating when I could make a graceful exit without drawing attention. From my corner vantage point, I noticed a commotion near the wedding planner's station. The venue manager, a stern-looking man in a tailored suit, was engaged in what appeared to be a tense conversation with Jessica and William. Though I couldn't hear their words, Jessica's body language conveyed distress, her hands gesturing emphatically while William repeatedly shook his head. The manager held up a document, pointing to specific sections, with increasing insistence. Jessica's face had lost its radiant glow, replaced by a look of panic I recognized from her childhood when she found herself in over her head. William pulled out his phone and stepped away to make a call, leaving Jessica facing the manager alone. After William's brief call, he returned looking grim. More heated words were exchanged before he stalked off toward his parents' table. Jessica remained with the manager, her perfect posture now slumped in defeat. She scanned the room desperately until her eyes landed on me. For the first time that day, she didn't look away. Instead, she smoothed her gown, fixed a bright smile on her face, and began making her way directly toward my table. The transformation was startling, like watching an actress step into a new role. As she approached, she opened her arms as if greeting a beloved relative. "Mom, I've been looking everywhere for you," she exclaimed loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Before I could respond, she embraced me tightly, whispering in my ear, "Please play along. I need your help." Confused by this sudden change, I allowed her to pull me to my feet and guide me toward a quieter corner of the room, her arm linked through mine, in a show of closeness that felt alien after the day's events. "What's going on, Jessica?" I asked once we were relatively private. Her carefully constructed facade cracked slightly, revealing genuine distress beneath. "The venue is demanding final payment before they'll let the reception continue. There's a balance due of $100,000. I blinked in surprise. $100,000? For what? "The reception, the flowers, the premium bar package," she explained hurriedly. "William's parents paid the deposit and most of the costs, but there's this final balance that's due tonight." "And they won't cover it?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. Jessica's eyes filled with tears that I might have believed were genuine if not for the day's earlier performance. "William's father says they've already contributed $400,000 and won't pay a cent more," he says. She hesitated. "He says, if I'm joining their family, I need to demonstrate financial responsibility." "I see," I said slowly. "And what exactly do you need from me?" Her expression shifted to one I recognized from her teenage years when asking for something significant. "I thought maybe you could help with the balance. I know it's a lot, but I always assumed you were planning to contribute to the wedding." The realization dawned on me with stunning clarity. You planned this elaborate wedding expecting me to pay $100,000 without ever discussing it with me. "Not the whole thing," she said defensively. "Just this final part. I know you have money saved, Mom. You always talked about wanting to help with my wedding someday." When I said that, Jessica, I was thinking of a reasonable celebration, not. I gestured around at the opulence surrounding us, whatever this is. "So, you're refusing to help me?" Her voice took on an accusatory edge. "I'm trying to understand why you'd make financial commitments in my name without consulting me, especially after spending the entire day pretending I don't exist." Jessica glanced nervously toward the venue manager who was watching us from across the room. "Look, I'm sorry about all that. It was just, William's parents have certain expectations about the kind of family he should marry into. They wouldn't understand our background." "Our background," I repeated. "You mean the fact that I'm a teacher who raised you alone after your father died? The fact that I worked multiple jobs so you could attend a good college? That background." "Please don't make this difficult, Mom," she pleaded. "If we don't resolve this, they'll shut down the reception. It will be humiliating." The irony of her concern about humiliation after what I'd endured today was not lost on me. More humiliating than being treated like a stranger at your own daughter's wedding. Jessica's expression hardened slightly. "I knew you wouldn't understand. You've never understood what it takes to be accepted in this world. I understand loyalty, Jessica, and gratitude, and honesty. Are those values not important in this world you're so desperate to join?" The venue manager approached us, clipboard in hand. "Miss Matthews, I hate to interrupt, but we really need to resolve the outstanding balance." Jessica fixed her society smile back in place. "My mother was just saying how happy she is to take care of it. Weren't you, Mom?" Both of them looked at me expectantly. In that moment, I thought about the life insurance money I had carefully invested over the years, watching it grow into a substantial sum that could indeed cover this expense. I had always intended it as a gift for Jessica, perhaps, to help with a house down payment or to start a family. Instead, she had assumed entitlement to it without a single conversation. I also thought about the day's accumulated indignities being directed through service entrances, seated far from my daughter, hearing her deny our relationship, watching her embrace the Harringtons as her real family. Each slight had cut deeply, but somehow this final presumption that I would silently fund her charade while being treated as an embarrassment crystallized everything. Something shifted inside me. For 15 years since Michael's death, I had centered my entire existence around Jessica's happiness and success. I had accepted her gradual distancing, her subtle corrections of my behavior, her embarrassment at my profession and lifestyle. I had told myself it was natural for children to outgrow their parents to forge their own paths. But this wasn't growth. This was erasure. And in that moment, I knew I needed to make a choice between enabling my daughter's rejection of me or standing up for my own dignity. The venue manager cleared his throat awkwardly. "So shall I run the card, or—" Jessica looked at me with pleading eyes, but behind them I saw calculation rather than genuine remorse. The realization broke my heart, but also fortified my resolve. "I need a moment to think," I said quietly. As they waited for my answer, I noticed the band returning to their positions, preparing for the evening's final set. A plan formed in my mind, clear and certain. Whether it was wise, I couldn't say, but it felt necessary in a bone-deep way I hadn't experienced in years. "Actually," I said, straightening my shoulders, "before we discuss payment, there's something I need to do." I walked deliberately toward the stage, aware of Jessica trailing behind me with growing alarm. The band leader looked at me curiously as I approached the microphone stand. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "May I borrow the microphone for just a moment?" "Mom, what are you doing?" Jessica hissed behind me. The band leader, seeing my determination, handed me the microphone with a supportive nod. I turned to face the room full of elegant strangers who had witnessed my humiliation throughout the day, though most had been too preoccupied with their own enjoyment to notice or care. As I stood there, microphone in hand, the room gradually quieted. Curious faces turned toward me, wondering who this unknown woman might be. In the front, William's parents regarded me with barely concealed disdain. Jessica stood frozen at the edge of the stage, her face a mask of horror. The moment stretched, filled with possibility. I could walk away now, pay the bill, and fade back into invisibility. Or I could speak my truth, whatever the consequences. In that suspended moment, I thought of Michael and what he would advise if he were here. The answer came immediately. He would tell me to be authentic, to stand in my own worth. I took a deep breath and raised the microphone. The room fell silent as I adjusted the microphone, all eyes now focused on me. From my elevated position on the stage, I could see Jessica's panicked expression and William's confusion. The Harringtons looked affronted that someone they considered a nobody would dare command attention at their event. "Good evening." I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Elena Matthews. I am Jessica's mother." A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. I saw guests exchanging glances, putting together pieces of a puzzle they hadn't realized was incomplete. First, I want to congratulate Jessica and William on their marriage. A wedding is a significant milestone not just for the couple but for the families who raised them. I paused, gathering courage for what came next. Many of you might be wondering why you haven't seen me in the traditional mother of the bride role today. The simple truth is that Jessica preferred I remain in the background, and until now I've respected that wish. Jessica had gone pale, rooted to the spot, as her carefully constructed facade began to crumble. William looked between his new wife and me with growing confusion. I raised Jessica alone after her father Michael died when she was 13. He was a wonderful man who would have been so proud to see the beautiful woman she's become. To support Jessica, I worked as a high school English teacher plus tutoring and summer school to provide her with opportunities I never had myself. The room had grown uncomfortably quiet. The clinking of glasses and murmured conversations had ceased entirely. I sold our family home to pay for Jessica's tuition at Brentwood University. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment so she could have the best education possible. Every decision I made was with her future in mind. I looked directly at William's parents now. Contrary to what you might have heard tonight, Jessica did not grow up with a wealthy godmother. There were no vacations in Europe or summer homes. There was just a small house in a working-class neighborhood where I read to her every night and helped with her homework at our kitchen table. Catherine Harrington's face had transformed from contempt to shock as the implications of my words sank in. Her husband looked equally stunned, his gaze shifting between Jessica and me. "I'm not sharing this to embarrass anyone," I continued. I've never been ashamed of our life or how hard we worked. In fact, I've always been proud that despite modest means, I was able to raise a daughter who could attend the same university as your son, Mr. and Mrs. Harrington." William had moved to Jessica's side now, whispering something urgently in her ear. She shook her head repeatedly, tears streaming down her face. "The venue manager has just informed Jessica that there's a balance due of $100,000 before the reception can continue. Jessica assumed I would cover this expense despite never discussing it with me." More murmurs spread through the crowd. I noticed several guests looking uncomfortable, perhaps recognizing the inappropriate nature of this public financial discussion, yet unable to look away from the unfolding drama. What Jessica doesn't know is that I did save money for her future. After her father died, I invested his life insurance policy and watched it grow over 15 years. I had planned to give her $100,000 as a wedding gift today. Jessica's expression shifted from mortification to hope in an instant. The calculation in her eyes was painful to witness. "I wanted this money to help start her married life, perhaps as a down payment on a home or saved for future children's education. I never imagined it would be used to fund a wedding celebration where I was treated as a stranger seated in the furthest corner and introduced as catering staff." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. William turned to Jessica with disbelief written across his face. His parents exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their own shock. "So tonight I'm faced with a decision. Do I pay this bill to save my daughter from embarrassment after she spent the day denying my existence? Do I reward behavior that has been not just hurtful but deliberately cruel?" The question hung in the air. Jessica took a step forward, her expression pleading, but I wasn't finished. "The money I saved for Jessica represents countless extra hours of work, careful budgeting, and personal sacrifices. But more importantly, it represents the love of a mother who wanted her daughter to have every advantage, even when that daughter grew embarrassed by her mother's ordinary life." I took a deep breath before delivering my decision. "I will not be paying the outstanding balance tonight. That money will instead fund a scholarship for single parents at the community college where I began my own education. Perhaps it will help someone else's child achieve their dreams without being ashamed of where they came from." The microphone trembled slightly in my hand as I concluded. "Thank you for listening. I wish the newlyweds a lifetime of happiness and the wisdom to recognize the true value of family, which has nothing to do with wealth or social standing." I returned the microphone to the stunned band leader and stepped down from the stage. The room remained in shocked silence as I walked steadily toward the exit head held high. Behind me, I could hear the rising buzz of conversations as guests processed what they had witnessed. William had pulled Jessica aside, their heated conversation visible, though not audible from where I stood. His parents appeared frozen in place, their perfect event having descended into uncomfortable reality. As I reached the exit, the venue manager approached me with an expression caught between professional courtesy and personal sympathy. "Ma'am, about the outstanding balance." "I've made my position clear," I said quietly. "I believe you should discuss it with the couple and their families." He nodded uncomfortably and turned back to the increasingly chaotic reception. From the doorway I watched as William confronted his parents, gesturing emphatically while Jessica stood tearfully beside him. The carefully orchestrated celebration was unraveling social masks, slipping to reveal the complicated truths beneath. For a brief moment I felt a pang of regret at causing such disruption on what should have been a joyous occasion. But deeper than that regret was a sense of liberation. After years of diminishing myself to accommodate Jessica's reinvention, I had finally spoken my truth. As I walked through the elegant lobby toward the exit, Margaret Williams' great-aunt caught up with me. "That was the most honest thing I've heard at a society wedding in 50 years, she said, squeezing my hand. "William should be so lucky to marry into your family's integrity rather than being embarrassed by it." Her kindness nearly broke my composure, but I managed to thank her before continuing outside. The valet looked confused to see a guest leaving so early, but quickly retrieved Eleanor's car, which she had left for me in case I needed an escape. As I drove away from the glittering venue, the emotional weight of the day finally caught up with me. Pulling over to the side of the road, I allowed myself to truly cry for the first time since arriving at the wedding. I cried for the daughter I had lost, to ambition and social climbing. I cried for the relationship that might never recover from today's events. But mostly I cried from relief at finally standing up for myself after years of accepting gradual erasure. When the tears subsided, I called Eleanor, who answered immediately. "Elena, how are you holding up?" I just publicly announced to an entire wedding reception that I wouldn't pay the $100,000 balance my daughter expected me to cover without asking. I said, the reality of my actions sinking in. "You did." "What?" Eleanor's shock came through clearly. "Oh my God, Elena, I need details. Every single one. Are you okay? Where are you now?" "Driving home. And yes, I think I'm okay. Actually, I think I'm better than I've been in years." As I drove through the quiet streets toward my small apartment, I felt a strange peace settling over me. I had no idea what tomorrow would bring, or how this would affect my relationship with Jessica moving forward. But for the first time in too long, I had honored my own worth instead of accepting invisibility. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same dignity and authenticity I had reclaimed tonight. The days following the wedding passed in silence. No calls from Jessica, no messages from wedding guests, nothing but the quiet routine of my daily life. Eleanor checked on me regularly, bringing dinner and distraction in equal measure. We avoided discussing what might be happening with Jessica and William, focusing instead on mundane topics like Eleanor's garden or the latest book club selection. A week after the wedding, I received a large envelope from the wedding photographer. Inside were dozens of professional photographs showing Jessica radiant in her gown, William handsome in his tuxedo, the Harringtons, proudly flanking the couple in formal portraits. I did not appear in a single image. I studied the photos with mixed emotions before placing them in a drawer. Perhaps someday they would be easier to look at. 2 weeks after the wedding, local gossip reached me through former colleagues who had friends in the Harringtons' social circle. Apparently, the reception had ended abruptly after my departure when the venue manager had insisted on immediate payment. William's parents had ultimately covered the balance, but not before a very public argument between William and his father. Jessica and William had left for their honeymoon the next day, amid tensions with both families. I tried not to dwell on these reports, focusing instead on moving forward with my own life. I contacted a financial advisor about establishing the scholarship fund I had mentioned. Creating something positive from this painful experience gave me a sense of purpose. 3 months passed without a word from Jessica. I marked my 68th birthday quietly with Eleanor and a few close friends, trying not to think about all the birthdays Jessica had celebrated with homemade cakes and thoughtful handmade cards. I wondered if she even remembered the date anymore, or if she had erased that detail along with the rest of our shared history. As fall turned to winter, I was surprised one evening by a knock at my door. Opening it revealed William standing alone in the hallway, looking uncomfortable but determined. "William," I said, genuinely surprised. "I wasn't expecting to see you. May I come in, Mrs. Matthews? I'd like to talk if you have time." I hesitated before stepping aside to let him enter. My apartment was modest but tidy, with bookshelves lining the walls and simple, comfortable furniture. William seemed to take in these details with new eyes as he sat on the edge of my couch. "I owe you an apology," he began directly, "for the wedding, for how you were treated, for my failure to recognize what was happening. I have no excuse except to say I was so caught up in my family's expectations that I didn't question things I should have." His sincerity seemed genuine, though I remained cautious. "Thank you for saying that. I appreciate you coming here." William ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him seem younger and less polished than the groom I had seen at the wedding. "After your speech, I had a lot of questions for Jessica. About her background, about your relationship. The answers were difficult to hear." "I imagine they were," I said neutrally. "She admitted everything. How she had deliberately minimized your role. How she had invented stories about her upbringing to impress my family. How she had planned to use your money without discussing it." I nodded slowly, pain and vindication mixing in equal measure. "I also had some hard conversations with my parents," he continued, "about their values, about how they treated you, about the kind of family I want to build versus the one I was raised in." "That sounds like a challenging conversation." William looked directly at me. "Jessica and I are having problems. Serious ones. The honeymoon was." He paused, searching for words, tense. "We've been living with my parents since returning, but that arrangement isn't working either. Jessica feels judged by them now that they know the truth, and truthfully, they are judging her harshly." While I felt sympathy for the difficult situation, I wasn't sure what William wanted from me. I'm sorry to hear that, but why are you telling me this? Because despite everything, she's your daughter. And I think she needs you, though she's too proud to admit it. He hesitated before adding, and because I'm trying to understand whether our marriage can work given the foundation of lies it was built on. The rawness of his admission caught me off guard. William, I can't advise you about your marriage. That's between you and Jessica. I know. I guess I just wanted to meet the real woman who raised Jessica, to understand where she came from. The Jessica I fell in love with had qualities I admired: determination, intelligence, resilience. Now I realize those came from you, not from some fictional society godmother. We talked for another hour, the conversation shifting to more neutral topics. William spoke about his work in finance, his ambivalence about following his father's path, his own doubts about the values he'd been raised with. I found myself warming to this more authentic version of the man my daughter had married. When he left, he shook my hand formally. Thank you for listening, Mrs. Matthews. I don't know what happens next with Jessica and me, but I wanted you to know that your words at the wedding had an impact. They made me question things I've accepted my whole life. After William's visit, I expected to hear from Jessica, but another month passed in silence. I proceeded with establishing the scholarship, working with the community college to create criteria focusing on single parents returning to education. The process was healing, transforming my hurt into opportunity for others. Then, on a snowy January evening, another knock came at my door. This time, Jessica stood in the hallway looking thinner and less polished than at her wedding. Without the expensive styling and designer clothes, she looked more like the daughter I remembered. "Mom," she said, her voice small. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside wordlessly, noticing she carried a small suitcase. She entered hesitantly, as if unsure of her welcome in the space where she had once lived. "William said he came to see you," she began after settling stiffly on the couch. "Yes, about a month ago." "What did he tell you?" Her voice betrayed anxiety. "That you were having difficulties, that his parents were not being supportive." Jessica nodded slowly. "We separated last week. I've been staying in a hotel, trying to figure out what to do next." I maintained my composure, though part of me wanted to immediately offer comfort, as I always had throughout her life. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" She challenged, a flash of the defensive Jessica I'd seen at the wedding emerging. "After what I did, I wouldn't blame you for thinking I deserved it. I never wished for your marriage to fail, Jessica. Despite everything." Her shoulders slumped, the brief defiance evaporating. "I know. That's why I'm here. You never stopped being the person you always were while I..." Her voice caught while I became someone I don't even recognize anymore. The admission hung in the air between us. When she continued, her voice was barely audible. "I've made so many terrible choices, Mom. I lied to William about my background. I invented stories about being raised by wealthy connections. I pretended not to know my own mother because I was ashamed of being ordinary. And now," I asked quietly, "now I have nothing. William's family thinks I'm a gold-digging liar. My so-called friends from that world won't return my calls. The money is gone, and I..." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I threw away the only person who ever truly loved me for who I actually am." I sat beside her then, though I didn't reach out to touch her. "Why, Jessica, I've been trying to understand. Was I such a terrible mother that you needed to erase me?" "No." The force of her response was startling. "You were perfect. That was almost the problem. You sacrificed everything for me, and I just kept taking. When I met William and his family, I saw a world where people had everything without trying, without sacrificing. I wanted that ease, that certainty. But at what cost?" "Everything that actually matters," she admitted, wiping her tears. "My integrity, my history, my relationship with you." We talked through the night, painful truths laid bare between us. Jessica revealed how she had gradually constructed an alternative history for herself at college, embellishing details at first, then creating wholesale fictions. How each lie had required another to maintain until she barely remembered the truth herself. How the pressure to maintain this facade had grown unbearable as the wedding approached. "I convinced myself you would understand," she said regarding the wedding bill, "that you'd want to help me cement my place in that world. By pretending not to know me." She flinched. "I told myself it was just for one day, that afterwards we could go back to normal. But there would never have been a normal after that, would there? No, I said honestly. Some lines once crossed change everything. As dawn broke outside my windows, Jessica asked the question that had clearly brought her to my door. Can you ever forgive me, Mom? I considered her question carefully before answering. Forgiveness isn't something given in a moment, Jessica. It's earned through actions over time. I think we both need to decide what kind of relationship we want moving forward, if any. I want to try, she said, exhaustion and hope mingling in her voice. I don't expect things to be the same. I know I've broken something precious. But if you're willing, I'd like to try to build something new. It would need to be based on honesty, I said firmly. No more convenient fictions. I know. I'm trying to be honest now, starting with William, with myself and with you. I offered her the spare bedroom for the night, both of us, recognizing this was just the beginning of a long, uncertain process of reconciliation. As I prepared for bed in my own room, I reflected on how differently this day had ended than I could have imagined that morning. The journey ahead would not be easy. Trust once shattered does not mend quickly or completely. But as I drifted towards sleep, I felt cautiously hopeful that perhaps my daughter had found her way back, not to who she had been, but to something more authentic than the person she had pretended to be. Rebuilding a relationship after profound betrayal is neither quick nor linear. The months following Jessica's return to my life were marked by awkward conversations, painful revelations, and gradual steps toward a new understanding between us. Jessica initially stayed in my spare bedroom for what we both thought would be a few days, but those days stretched into weeks as she confronted the reality of her situation. Her separation from William had left her without financial resources. Her previous job connections were tied to his family's social circle, and her resume had been padded with experiences that never happened. I don't even know who I am anymore, she confessed one evening, as we sat at my small kitchen table, the same table where I had helped her with homework years ago. I spent so long pretending to be someone else that I lost track of the real me. Perhaps that's where you start then, I suggested, rediscovering who Jessica Matthews truly is beneath all the stories. Jessica enrolled in therapy, working to understand the insecurities and fears that had driven her deceptions. She began volunteering at the community center, where I had once taught adult literacy classes, initially just to fill her days, but eventually finding genuine fulfillment in helping others. 3 months after the wedding disaster, I officially launched the scholarship fund I had promised in my impromptu speech. Instead of funding Jessica's wedding expenses, the money would now help single parents pursue higher education. I named it after Michael, honoring the father whose memory Jessica had nearly erased in her quest for social acceptance. To my surprise, Jessica asked to be involved with the scholarship program. She helped organize a small ceremony for the first recipients, speaking candidly about the value of authenticity and the dangers of denying one's true self. It was the first time I had heard her publicly acknowledge our actual history, not the fictional version she had created. My mother taught English to high school students for 30 years, she told the audience of scholarship recipients and community members. She raised me alone after my father died when I was 13. Everything good in me came from her example, though it took me far too long to appreciate that gift. I watched from the back of the room, tears threatening. The daughter speaking these words was neither the child I had raised, nor the social climber who had denied me at her wedding, but someone new, someone still finding her way forward. William reached out occasionally, first to Jessica and later to me. His own journey paralleled ours in some ways, as he questioned the values he had been raised with and made difficult choices about his future. 6 months after the separation, he and Jessica met for coffee, a meeting she approached with both trepidation and hope. He's filing for divorce, she told me afterward, her expression complex but not devastated. We both agreed it's for the best. The foundation wasn't solid enough to build on. Are you all right? I asked cautiously. She considered the question seriously before answering. Not yet. But I think I will be eventually. For the first time, I'm trying to build a life based on who I actually am, not who I think others want me to be. On the 1-year anniversary of the wedding, Jessica suggested we have dinner together to mark the occasion not as a celebration, but as acknowledgement of how far we had come. Over a simple meal at my apartment, she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it," she said quietly. Inside was a check for $10,000, a fraction of what the wedding had cost, but significant nonetheless. "It's the first installment," Jessica explained. "I know I can never repay everything, financial or emotional, but I wanted you to know I'm committed to making amends." The money had come from her new job teaching English as a second language to adult learners, a position that paid modestly but brought her satisfaction I had never seen during her social climbing days. I tried to refuse the check, but she was insistent. "Please, Mom, this is important to me. Add it to the scholarship fund, use it for yourself, whatever you choose, but let me do this." I accepted, then recognizing this was part of her healing process as much as mine. The check went into the scholarship fund, helping another single parent pursue their dreams. As time passed, our relationship found a new equilibrium. Not the unconscious closeness of her childhood or the strained pretense of her college years, but something more conscious and intentional. We were two adults choosing to be in each other's lives with clear-eyed awareness of past hurts and careful tending of new growth. 5 years after the wedding that wasn't quite what anyone had expected, Jessica invited me to dinner at her small apartment. She had moved across town teaching at a community college and dating occasionally, though never with the social climbing agenda that had driven her relationship with William. "I have news," she said, as we finished eating. "I've been offered a position heading the English language program for immigrants at the community center. It's a big responsibility developing curriculum and managing other teachers." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "You've worked hard for this." "I also wanted to tell you I've been seeing someone," she added with slight nervousness. "His name is David. He's a social worker I met through the center." "You haven't mentioned him before." "I wanted to be sure it was serious before introducing you. I'm trying to do things differently this time. More honestly." She took a deep breath. "He's coming over for dessert, if that's okay. He knows all about our history. The real version." When David arrived, I was struck by how different he was from William. Where William had been polished and somewhat reserved, David was warm and unpretentious. He greeted me with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about my teaching career and the scholarship fund. Most tellingly, he looked at Jessica with appreciation for exactly who she was, not who she might pretend to be. Later, driving home from their apartment, I reflected on the journey we had traveled. The pain of the wedding day had not disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something else, something that had ultimately led to growth for both of us. I thought about the different forms of love I had experienced in my life. The romantic love I shared with Michael, cut short by his untimely death. The maternal love for Jessica that had sustained me through years of single parenthood. The self-love I had finally embraced when I refused to accept invisibility and erasure. What I had learned most deeply was that unconditional love does not mean unconditional acceptance of harmful behavior. True love sometimes requires standing firm, speaking truth, and allowing natural consequences to unfold. My decision at the wedding had been the most difficult form of love, the kind that refuses to enable destruction even when that refusal causes short-term pain. Jessica would never be the daughter I had once imagined, and I had made peace with that reality. Instead, she had become something perhaps more valuable, a woman who had faced her worst self and committed to something better, who had learned that authentic connection matters more than social status or material wealth. As for me, I had discovered that even at 67, it wasn't too late to reclaim my dignity, to establish boundaries, and to create meaning from painful experiences. The scholarship fund now supported dozens of single parents each year, creating ripples of opportunity that extended far beyond our small family drama. There are some wounds that never completely heal, some trust that cannot be fully restored, but there is also beauty in the imperfect mending, in the visible seams that remind us of what was broken and what was saved. Jessica and I were creating that kind of beauty now, day by day, conversation by conversation, in the honest acknowledgement of our shared history and the careful cultivation of our future. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between supporting someone you love and standing up for your own dignity? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking and subscribing to hear more reflections on family forgiveness and finding your authentic self even in life's most challenging moments. Thank you for listening to my story today, and remember that it's never too late to reclaim your worth, even when those closest to you fail to see it.